Hey guys, welcome back to the internet. Another weekend is here, which means it's time for some more scary stories. The theme of tonight's stories are going to be, what is the creepiest thing that has happened to you personally that made you question reality? I'm curious if anyone else had this happen. Years ago, my then wife and I would run into the same woman everywhere we went. And I mean everywhere we went. This went on for about a year. Go to the grocery store, she would be there shopping. Starbucks, yep, sitting right behind us. Walking around the mall, she would pass us walking in the other direction. Movie theater, she'd be behind us in line getting popcorn. The creepiest encounter was while driving on the freeway. My wife looked at the car next to us and screamed. Yep, it was her. She was always alone, never talked to us, and always made eye contact. She had a very unique appearance. She was very tall, very thin, and had very tight skin on her face. It was so unusual that we joked that we were being studied by an alien. It was some serious glitch in the Matrix stuff. I don't know that I could just play that one off as a joke. I would start to get really freaked out and probably go and ask them what's the deal. It was years ago, when I was about 17. I had gotten home from school and wasn't feeling well, so I spent the rest of the day just laying on the couch. By about 8 p.m., I was feeling even worse, and decided I should just try and sleep whatever it is off, so I go to my room and get in bed and pass out pretty quickly. I don't know how long I was asleep, but I suddenly woke up in my pitch-black bedroom, and all I could think was, I'm going to die right now. My body was so weak. The room was spinning and my body felt like it was on fire. I look over the edge of my bed and sitting on the edge is my grandmother, who died just a few months ago. She passed my arm and says, "It's going to be okay. Just call for your dad. Try it. Call for your dad." So I start calling for him and it felt like an eternity, but he finally burst through my door and asked what's wrong. I look over and my grandmother is gone. After that, he gets me up and takes me to the ER, where I have a fever of 106, which explains a lot. I had to get a ton of fluids and a shot in my hip, but I eventually felt okay-ish. Her being there felt so real. It was so weird. I know logically she wasn't, but it felt so real. That sort of messed with me a little. I loved her dearly, and her death was very sudden. We kept her ashes in a nice urn in the house under a painting she had done herself. When I got home and passed by, I said thanks to her. I know it was the fever melting my brain, and maybe some sleep paralysis, but it still made me question the afterlife, and those sorts of things. Man, I gotta say, most of my really supernatural feelings and experiences I've had in my life have occurred while asleep or right after waking up. I swear, it's like your brain is on a completely different level when you're asleep. I've told this before, but about 7 years ago I was at my mom's house. I live next door, and this white car pulls into the driveway. We weren't expecting anyone, so I assumed they were lost and needed directions, and went to the door. A white woman in her 50s or 60s got out, along with a 9 or 10-year-old black girl. Surprised me because I expected the kid to stay in the car if they just needed directions. I open the door and the woman kind of nudges the girl towards me, both with big smiles on their faces. I said hi, what can I help you with? She asked if I was so-and-so and I said yes. She told me that she went to a neighbor's house looking for me and they pointed her to our house. They just kind of stared at me expectantly, like I was supposed to know the girl and be happy to see her. When I didn't react, the woman told me that they were here to see the dentist. No dentists here. Small ranch-style house in a fairly rural neighborhood. No dentists here. Not anywhere near us. The woman and the girl just kept smiling. They didn't look confused. They just kept saying, "Are you sure?" Finally they left, and later I asked the neighbor who directed them to our house, and she said she never told the woman my name. That the woman asked for me specifically. It's always kind of haunted me. I really feel like I was supposed to know that girl. Like, if I was a guy, this would be someone trying to introduce me to a kid I didn't know I had. I honestly started wondering if I was nuts and had given up a child for adoption. It was that strange of a feeling. My mom firmly believes the girl will come back someday to tell me what it's about, and I think about it frequently. It drives me insane to wonder what they really wanted. Yeah, I think that it's just kind of an all-around weird feeling when people you've never met just seem to know a lot about you. I feel like there's some people watching this right now that might fit that description. When I was 12 or so, and still living at my parents' house, I woke up in the middle of the night to pee. I got to the bathroom and heard what sounded like a party going on downstairs. Laughter, music, the sound of glasses being knocked together for a toast, the whole shebang. I thought it was weird that my parents had friends over so late and hadn't told me, but I decided to go see who was there. I opened the door to the kitchen, and the entire downstairs was completely dark and silent. Not even a TV on. I was thoroughly confused, but the strangeness of the situation didn't really register, so I never told anyone. Years and years later, I mentioned this to my dad, and he said he had heard them, too. Turns out there used to be a small public bar in their home, which is over 150 years old. I guess some of the patrons decided to hang out for eternity. Man, it's gotta suck trying to sleep in a house like this. At least if you have people downstairs, you can ask them to be quiet. What do you do when there's just ghosts downstairs being noisy? My cat hated me for the first 7 years we had him. He was a feral that was tamed by my wife, and only accepted affection from her. My wife assured me that this was common for ferals. Then one day, he suddenly warmed up to me and wanted me to pet him. We've been best friends ever since. This was approximately 4 years ago, about the time that my wife's brain cancer was becoming aggressive, even before we were aware of it. She died 2 years ago. It's like he knew it was just going to be the two of us one day. You know, speaking of cats... So Faye isn't a feral cat, but we kind of have a similar situation going on to this story. Because I've got a friend who comes over pretty regularly. And yeah, Faye just she's very attached and affectionate with me. But she's not really that into anybody else. So I guess the day she starts really relying on my friend that comes over so much, I'll know that I'm going to be replaced soon. I burnt about 10 filing cabinets full of papers for my high school friend's dad for less than minimum wage back in 2004. Literally millions of lines of words, maybe even 1 million pages or close, just tossing them into a barrel burning. After a few hours, I victoriously tossed in the last folder. A little sprite of flame shoots out, and a singed fortune cookie-looking piece of paper floats out to the ground in front of me, with the words only, "What burns does not return." I still don't know what that was about. The probability is just astronomical. Hey man, don't underestimate fortune cookies. They can be a little bit freakishly accurate, even though they are often very vague. I can think of a few things that happened in my first year of college. I used to live in an apartment kind of place on campus, with 3 other people. We all had our separate bedrooms, but shared a living space. It was on the 7th floor, to give a better idea. Once, I woke up at around 2 a.m. to find that my phone was automatically playing a song. I closed the app, but it happened 2 to 3 times again. I would have put this down to my phone being weird, but then one of my roommates told me that the exact same thing happened to her as well. This wasn't all. A few days later, I woke up to the beeping sound coming from my phone, and when I checked, it was apparently a sound recording. The duration showed as 0, though, which meant that it shouldn't technically play at all. I deleted it immediately. Another time, my roommate and I were watching a movie and had stayed up till 3. It ended and she went to sleep. After a few minutes, she burst into my room and asked me what I was doing. I was confused because I was just lying in bed reading. She said that she heard very weird noises from the window, which she assumed I was making to scare her or something. I went to her room and it sounded like heavy breathing or sighing. I told her it was just the wind. We opened the window and saw that the trees were completely still. I don't have the same phone, room, or roommates anymore, even though I still stay on campus. You know, it's kind of hard to explain why, but I would just be absolutely terrified if there were any signs of my place being haunted. Even if the most that ever happened was maybe the lights being turned on or off on their own, or things just moving slightly. I consider myself a horror junkie, but that would just drive me out of a place so fast. Not necessarily creepy, but definitely made me question reality. I used to work in a gas station. One regular customer was like night and day. One day he'd be soft-spoken and shy. The next he'd be obnoxious. His cigarette preference also changed from day to day, but he always came in the same work truck with the same guys at the same time of day. One day, he walked in and went straight to the bathroom. A minute later, he walked in again and came to the counter. Twins. It took me 8 months to realize they were twins, and not even identical twins either. They just looked really similar. Yeah, I know the feeling when you work retail and you deal with so many different people. You might start to vaguely recognize some people, but if you see 2 people that look similar, it's pretty easy to get them mixed up. I'm the type of person who keeps my bedroom door closed and locked all the time, no matter what, even if I'm home alone. So, a year ago, it was 1 a.m. and I had decided to get a glass of water before going to bed. After coming back in my room, I swore that I had closed and locked my door. After about 30 minutes of me dozing in and out of sleep, I suddenly felt all the ambient noise completely dissipate and immediately got that something feels off feeling. I got up and saw that my door was wide open. It scared the crap out of me as I was home alone. I've just chalked it up to being a one-time mishap on my part. See, what was I just saying about weird things happening in your place? That's why it's nice to have a pet, at least, because then you're just well, any unexplainable noises, I'll just blame on the cat. Cat crossing. I had 2 bananas, connected at the stem part. I broke them in 2, ate one, threw out the peel, came back for the other one, and it's gone. I live alone. Either I have a rotting banana somewhere in my apartment, or I've gone crazy. Update, it's been weeks. Haven't seen or smelled the other banana. I'll accept that I just went bananas for that moment. This whole story is bananas. When I was a kid, between 8 or 9, I used to wake up every night to headlights coming through my bedroom window. The lights would then stop and turn off. Not as if a car drove by, but as if they were turned off. Then, the long shadows of a man, as if it were looking through my window, would pass by and stop in front of my window. I would lay really still and pretend nothing happened. Every night for months. Eventually I convinced myself it was imagination. Now that I think back, it stopped when my stepdad moved in. My mom was single, but I was convinced it wasn't real. Across the street lived my best friend, whose mom was also single, and she refused to sleep in her bedroom. Her window faced my window. She told me years later it was because every night a man would park in her side yard and would walk over to my yard. The long shadows were from the light in her yard. She eventually decided it was my dad checking on us, and never told me until I was a teenager. It wasn't my dad. I asked him. So I thought I was crazy and hallucinating for years, and perhaps I wasn't, or two kids were having odd dreams at the same time every night. Maybe you should try calling the police next time. I was playing with our dog in the living room. At the time, I was around 9 years old. We're doing our usual, only play like this when mom isn't home, else she'll tell us to stop, type of playing. So basically, playing fetch in the living room. At one point, I threw the toy, which caused it to ricochet off the living room into the kitchen. Franz, our dog's name, chased it and disappeared around the corner to get it. At that exact moment, the front door opened, and Mom walked in with Franz on a leash after a 2-hour walk over the bench and dunes. I tried to explain, but can't. I played with him for at least 15 minutes, and apparently my imagination, but I just don't believe that. So, this is just a legitimate reality glitch. I really just don't know how else to explain it. I worked at a small retail shop that sold mostly small accessories and clothes. I have never really believed in ghosts, but my coworkers always swore that the place was haunted. Lights would flicker randomly, and canvases would fall violently to the ground, despite my efforts of propping them up so that they didn't. The thing that really made me question, everything happened when I was closing alone at night. We had a sunglass display in the middle of the store, just a flat glass shelf with a bunch of sunglasses laid out nicely on top. I walked past to the register and hear this huge crash. Look back and all the sunglasses were on the floor. It looked like somebody took their arm and dragged it across the shelf, pushing them all off. There wasn't anything above the display, so nothing could have knocked it off. I don't have an explanation for it. It was right as I was about to close, too. He was a rude ghost. There's a lot of people out there who say they don't believe in ghosts, and they see all these stories as people just, maybe hallucinating or making things up and stuff like that. And, well, I can understand that to a point. It wouldn't really surprise me if people are making stories like this up, or they're just playing tricks in their head. But I have a hard time believing that all of these stories are fake. And all that it really takes is for one of them to be true for you to really believe in it. You thought that was the end of the video. Don't worry, we're only halfway done. I actually really like stories like this. I dreamed it was dark, raining, and I was in the middle of the woods walking towards a campfire. There were 3 men around it whom I had never seen before. One was wearing a shirt and pants with huge white and black horizontal stripes on it, such as a prisoner might wear. I could not figure out why I was not scared in my dream. Fast forward 10 months later, we're hunting and camping. A friend brings along 3 of his friends that we had never met before. I have to go to the bathroom. I buried a 50-gallon drum and put the seal on it. And my husband walks with me since it's dark. We start back and it starts to rain. We get to the clearing and there are his 3 friends around the fire. One wearing the outfit described above. I wasn't afraid in my dream because my husband was behind me and I just couldn't see him. No one believes me. You know how I said earlier in this video that, my brain feels like it's on a completely different level while I'm dreaming? I feel like our brains, when they're not being bogged down by all of our other senses of being awake, I feel like they just have so much power to let loose, and we can't even really understand what it is that they're doing. Talking with my son when he was 3 or 4 years old, while he was playing with a Darth Vader toy in his mom's lap. Talking about the Wiggles or Barney or whatever, completely unprompted, he said nonchalantly, "Dingo cold, dingo cold," and goes back to playing with the Star Wars toys. I asked him what he said, and he denied saying anything, with a giggle. My wife very clearly heard him say, "Dingo cold," too. I never told him about my childhood best friend, Dingo, being killed in an avalanche 10 years earlier. We could come up with plenty of theories as to how this happened, but that's why it's a mystery. By my hometown, there was a hiking trail that people went to very infrequently. It was along the side of the Niagara Escarpment, so it had some climbable cliffs, and some very shallow caves that you could crawl around on. I went with some friends when I was 19 or 20, and we were crawling around and found a cave that went pretty deep. We had never been in there before, had never even seen it before. So we pushed forward and decided to check it out, even though we had no flashlights, and this was when cell phones didn't really have a flashlight function. We stepped into the cave, and it was easily 20 to 30 degrees cooler than outside. Upon looking around with which light we had, we noticed it was really clean inside the cave. As in, it didn't have beer cans littered everywhere like all the other small caves did. While in there, we got a really eerie feeling after being in there shortly. Hearing weird and strange things, feeling like we were being touched, poked, and pulled, and not having any way to figure out who was doing it because it was too dark. We were just using lighters to see what was around us. We were convinced one of us was messing with the others, although anytime we sparked up the lighter, we were always decently far apart. We decided to hightail it out of there after only a few minutes. Convinced to come back with flashlights, we came to see that it was now dusk outside. When we entered, it was midday. Somehow we had lost roughly 3 hours inside of this cave. We went back with flashlights the next week, but have never been able to find this cave again. Maybe you found Bigfoot's hiding spot. Actually, I'm pretty sure Bigfoot watches my videos. I've watched The Ring back in 2003 or 2004. Parents were out and it was late. I love horror movies, and generally I'm not the one who is frightened. A couple of minutes after the movie ended, the landline rang. 2 a.m. in the middle of the night. The landline had no display whatsoever. I tentatively answered, but there was no sound, nothing. I hung up and my heart almost burst out of my chest. A few moments later it rang again. It was my aunt asking where my mom was. Man, these moments I was like, that cannot be. My phone rings all the time and there's almost never anybody there. But that's just because I have terrible service and the calls never really go through correctly. At least 6 times in my life, I've gone home, I know I locked the doors, but when I'm about to put my key in, the door opens like someone was expecting me, but no one's there. It's happened in my mom's house, my house, and other people's houses. I was helping my buddy move into his new house, and when we came back with more stuff, I had to pee, so I ran to the front door, and it opened. When he came in, he said he locked it before we left. I don't know what it is, but maybe it's a superpower. Well, if you ever master that superpower, you've got a lot of robbery potential. I am a TA in our college's anatomy class, which takes place in the cadaver lab, with dead bodies. Late one night, I'm working alone in the cadaver lab, and I start to hear a noise. It's hard to tell what the noise sounds like, but it's a consistent muffled noise. So I kind of walk around the room and locate it. Now, normally the bodies are all kept in these big metal crates, but at the time we had one more body than we did crate, so one body was in a plastic body bag, and that's where the noise was coming from. So I'm terrified at this point, all alone in the lab, looking down at this plastic body bag that I can see the outline of the body that presumably is coming back to life, because it is definitely making noise. I stood over this body for a solid minute, debating whether I should open the bag, and finally the noise just stops. I got all my stuff together and bolted from the lab. A couple weeks later, the professor tells me to be careful if I ever work on that body, because there's a live pacemaker in it, so don't cut into that, and it will vibrate and ring every few hours if it's low on battery. I let out the biggest sigh of relief that we weren't haunted. Well, finally we get a story with an actual explanation at the end. My wife and I had a 2-hour drive back from St. Louis to our home, during which both of us lost time. Woke up 3 hours later, still an hour and a half away from home, only having used enough gas to go that half hour, and our GPS showed we had been driving our normal route. We still had no freaking idea what happened, but we know we hadn't pulled over, and that neither of us had any memory between taking an exit and seeing this own particular billboard for a restaurant we always pass. Still freaks me out. Maybe you just happen to pass through 2 time zones and a daylight savings time all at once? I don't know, I've heard of similar stories like this, but where time actually did pass and they did progress, but they don't remember any of it. Freaking auditory hallucinations. F those. I was driving down a rural, really dark road at night. I'm super sleep deprived, drunk several of those 240 milligram caffeine Monster Energy drinks. I didn't have the radio on, so it was pretty quiet. Then the whispering started. I'm confused, don't understand what it is. I try to focus on it. Is my stereo not all the way off? Then it started mumbling, louder. F, this ain't good. Then I hear a very clear, turn here. But my GPS says continue for 12 miles. Haha, F that. Nope, F that. I turn the radio on really loud and continue home. The next physical, I mention it to my doc. Am I insane? Well, both sleep deprivation and caffeine have been known to induce auditory hallucinations individually. Combining both, it's perfectly normal to hear things. If it happens again, come back in. I thought I was going mental. For those of you who've been following me a long time, you know that I have that separate channel called The Shadower, where I would go around and just see what other people's jobs were like. Well, on one of my videos, I job shadowed a truck driver, and he told me a bunch of stories about being on the road, and he actually told me some similar things about a road that's considered to be haunted, where he was just hearing voices while driving down there. And apparently he's run into a lot of other people who've heard them down that same road too. One morning, I woke up to my alarm going off at 6:30, as usual, and got up and cooked breakfast. As soon as I sat down to eat, my alarm went off again, and I woke up in bed. I dreamed that I woke up and went about my morning routine. That was easily the most disorienting thing I've ever experienced. Yeah, it's kinda hard to remember what you've done already when that happens. My friend was about to clean his gun, and it was pointed directly at me when it went off. For a few seconds, we stood there in shock, him thinking he killed me, and me in a state of pure panic. Afterwards, we found the bullets embedded in a wall beside me. I will never let him live that crap down. Well, maybe you are the ghost in this story. I once woke up to the sound of heavy breathing, and it felt as if I was being watched. I couldn't move for a while either. Then I just blurted out my dog's name and kept calling for him. He didn't run over, and as soon as I could get myself to move, I went looking for him. I found him sitting in the kitchen doorway, just staring straight forward. I started calling him from right behind him, and he wouldn't even turn around. Then I touched his back, and he turned to glance at me, but went right back to his trance. A year or so after the fact, I found out that the first thing was probably sleep paralysis. Not too sure about what was going on with the dog, though. Yeah, if you guys are looking for some really terrifying stuff, go look into sleep paralysis. That's like one of the scariest things that can even happen to you. I had something happen to me just last night, actually. I wouldn't really call it sleep paralysis, but I had a dream where I was like laying in a bed, and I was paralyzed and I couldn't move, as there was some guy like walking towards me with a big knife. I mean, I don't remember too much from the rest of the dream, but I know that I like woke up from that dream, but I was like in another dream too. So I thought that I was awake and telling everybody about that horrifying dream I had, but I was still just in another dream. Maybe I'm not even really telling you this right now. But anyways, thanks to everybody who watched all the way to the end. I gotta be honest, this is my favorite scary video I've ever done. Stories like this actually creep me out quite a bit. I actually got goosebumps recording this. And now I'm a little bit afraid of going to bed tonight. But hey, that's what these stories are for, so hope you guys enjoyed, and I will talk to you guys again on Monday.